Hello, my name is Carter Ta. I'm a communication studies major and a senior here at San Jose State. It's an odd choice of major to be involved in a game development club. So I decided to bring something a little different to our club. In the past semester, have been hosting video game news discussions. So I've talked about topics like the Activision Blizzard lawsuit and Chinese government's limits on gaming, among other topics that I think would be relevant to what we want to keep up with as video gamers and also as consumers who are interested in ethics and who just wants to make sure the environment of video gaming remains a positive and progressive space. But anyways, I will be getting on to today's topic, the rise of video game workers unions. I'm going to start off by introducing the organization that I have this logo here on the slide for. It's called Game Workers United. They are not themselves a union, but they are an international grassroots movement founded to organize unions all over the world. And they've worked with unions and other organizations setting up to be unions in their countries like the UK, Ireland, France, Finland, Scotland, and Australia. Also, Game Workers United has supported actions such as the 2019 walkout from Riot Games over their sex discrimination claims. They've also conducted social media campaigns against video game corporation CEOs like Bobby Kotick of Activision Blizzard. So they're very successful, and in fact, so much so that one of the chief organizers of this movement, Emma Kinema, was eventually hired by a very large labor union, the Communication Workers of America, where they wanted her to run a campaign just for video game workers and other tech workers to organize unions in North America. And from that have sprung two of the latest and the first two, actually, video game worker unions in North America. So I'll start by introducing the first one. This is Rodeo Workers United. It was established in December 15th of 2021 in this tweet on their newly created Twitter accounts. And according to the video game news website Polygon, an article that they done on the founding of the union, quote, with voluntary recognition from Rodeo management, Rodeo Workers United will not have to face a National Labor Relations Board vote. A quick side note, the National Labor Relations Board is a federal agency in the US that enforces labor law, especially pertaining to labor unions. And also by Rodeo management, this is a somewhat independent contained union of a game studio called Rodeo Games. It's an indie studio that released its first game, Beast Breaker, available on Switch and Epic Game Store. Not sponsored, by the way. But moving on, Polygon continued to interview these Rodeo game designers, all part of the union, like Kellen Zhang, and the employees were inspired by what their colleagues were doing in the game and tech industry. Like, for example, other than what Games Workers United has organized, another movement is the Voltage Organized Workers. This is a collection of workers, of developers at the game studio that created the Love Struck mobile game, who won a pay increase after they went on strike for 21 days without even being in the union. So this union is partnered with the campaign run by the aforementioned Emma Kinema at the Communication Workers of America under their campaign that is called Code CWA. And the second North American union that is also partnered with Code CWA is Games Worker Alliance Union, established just this year, January 21st. In a press release by the campaign, it states that the quality assurance workers at Raven Software Studio under Activision Blizzard, this is the studio known for producing COD games, announced their launch and requested voluntary recognition from Activision Blizzard management in alignment with the desire of the supermajority of the workforce at Raven Software. However, 4 days later, on January 25th, Activision Blizzard declined to recognize this union. Therefore, they will be filing with the National Labor Relations Board for a vote on whether their union should go official or not. To recap the news as to how this union got formed, the Raven, at the time of its founding, the Raven software quality assurance workers, so their game testers, were entering the fifth week of a strike that began on December 6, 2021, when over 60 of them walked out in protest after 12 of their co-workers got laid off. And this is just the third work stoppage that an Activision Blizzard subsidiary has suffered from ever since they were sued by the California state government in July 2021 for their sexual harassment and misconduct claims. So, in more recent news on this greater Activision Blizzard issue, they've also hired a union busting law firm to represent their company. So a little, there's going to be a lot of tough battles ahead for video game worker unions against big corporations like Activision Blizzard. But also, furthermore, just this year, on January 18th, Microsoft announced they were going to acquire Activision Blizzard, which will be finalized in 2023. So now we have the greater big tech sector coming into the video game industry and moving in and consolidating their power here. So I'm just personally wondering, like, how are these video game workers unions going to be able to stand up for their employees that they represent, and how they're going to effectively defend themselves and even fight back against all these big tech corporations. And my question to start off this discussion is, oh, I forgot the slide. Where will video game worker unions take the industry in the future? And with that, at the end of my presentation, I open up the floor for questions that everyone else wants to ask. And then we'll also all get around to them in a roundtable style of answering each other's questions. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
Can I take a swipe at an answer? A potential
sure,
answer
go
to
ahead.
the question? Away from a toxic culture of sexual harassment and away from crunch. Not to eliminate it, but just because those are, like, crunch is just so fundamentally unhealthy.
Yeah, I can definitely see it moving away from crunch. I think that would be the biggest problem that gets solved once the unions come into play.
Well, that and the toxicity, don't forget.
Honestly, so I'm not too experienced in history of labor unions. I'm guessing you are, James.
I wouldn't say that I'm very experienced with it. I mean, I've as a faculty member at San Jose State, we do have a union, and our union has represented us very well. I think I was thinking about this, and I'm thinking that the phrase that I would keep, or that I would emphasize here, is this idea of collective bargaining, right? So the union members are able to bargain with one voice and to be heard sort of at the table. They don't have to the company doesn't just say, oh, this is the way it is. The union or all of the workers can say, like, well, how about this, or how about we don't work?
Yeah, that is the basis of a labor union defending its
Well,
workforce.
so thinking about that, like, what are the issues that that workers care about, right? I mean, you mentioned the Blizzard Activision suit, right, with the sort of the misogynistic culture where, like, women are being paid less. There's, I think that in games in general, we have this sort of, I think there's a bit of a toxic culture that's still hanging out here. And we see it in places like Blizzard, where it was, like, really, I guess, pretty obvious. if you were within it. But those are things that a union can actually very handily deal with. But an employee without a union, what do? You talk to HR, and HR works for the bosses.
So just to come at concern from the opposite side, just because I was leading in with the history on labor unions, as on labor unions, traditionally, at least in the United States, they had a mass political influence.
Mm-hmm.
I heard like in the longshoremen, for example, that's a term that was used for labor unions of like the East Coast. For example, I don't know quite the influence of communication workers of America, but I would assume like say they would mass political influence. Wouldn't that invite its own like toxic issues if all of a sudden politics suddenly came into workplace even to replace the more personal toxicity that was going on?
Mm-hmm.
There would be like a different it could be like a different dynamic, I'm saying. Like instead of like the strict hierarchical, oh the managers are abusing the employees, it's oh suddenly we may have to cater to outside political influence. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Most of the criticism that I see is like ends up being really unfounded. It says like, oh, prices will go up. Well, they're going to go up anyways, for one thing. But it's they there hasn't been an industry that, at least not within recent memory, that's been put out of business by it. And I know I'm arguing against myself here. Um, when you talk about like sort
I'm
of like culture issues, there are unions that have really terrible reputations. And the Teamsters back in the like 1970s were a murderous, rampaging bunch of people. That
well, I
that's
don't
not to
think we're
say,
going to get that far.
yeah. Well, no, I'm just saying, it's like if you're like looking for counterexamples, right? It like with any organization, the people who run it can have a giant amount of influence over the direction of
Mm,
it. And if the people who run it are corrupt, then
yeah.
the question is then really are you helping the people that are in the union if your union is corrupt? But that feels like a different question, honestly.
Yeah, I don't see any concerns with like pricing or like finances. That's the people make money anyways. We're just redistributing the money, right? So that's fine with me. I guess I'm just wondering what the political influence of a labor union moving forward is going to have.
Well, um, so like unions typically do get involved with politics, but they also ideally um, are concerned with what their membership cares about. And if the membership is split on a political issue, then the union probably should not get involved with it. But if the union or if the membership is in agreement on an issue, well, then that makes sense that the union gets involved, regardless of what the issue is.
Okay. So, so as long as the organization of the labor union is more acceptable and perhaps less centralized than the corporate structure the employees are moving away from, and it will be bad enough that less toxicity will occur in a union environment versus the corporate environment, I guess.
Yeah, I think that there's an incentive to listen to the concerns of individuals in a membership organization like a union, whereas um, when you think about the upper levels of administration in a billion-dollar company, their job is to protect the company.
Yeah.
And so it's
So,
like it's not to say that they are doing their job when they hush up uh, a sexual harassment case and get it just sort of like over. And if that means like keeping the harasser and letting like sort of a lower level person go, well, that's, they've done their job. I don't think it's a moral job. I don't think it. But if there is a union there, then that person person is a member of the union, then they have representation, and they're able to bring it back to the table and say, look, you can't just let this person go. And by the way, your HR department is not responding to these sexual harassment cases. It's another venue to be heard, I guess.
Yeah, I find it crazy. For example, like CEO Bobby Kotick, while he may not be directly responsible for sexual harassment claims, he's silencing people who also speak
Mhm.
out about it in the company. It's pretty crazy. Like, he's a board member on Coca-Cola. They still haven't ousted him. I'm guessing that's because of the shareholders of Coca-Cola. I don't know how that works. It's
It
like,
could also be that he's just making them money.
yeah, exactly. Because the shareholders, they want profit because they want their shares to go up in price.
And
So
and
there's
so
definitely competing interests.
so imagine this: you're in the HR department, right, of this company, and somebody is like, and there's like an accusation of sexual harassment, but that person has left the company or been pushed out. What do you do when the person who pays your salary, who's in charge of your promotion, says, well, that's that?
So yeah, in a way, I'm Microsoft obviously must know about the risk they're taking on for
Mhm.
taking a corporation that hasn't resolved its HR issues yet. So the assumption is, I guess, by most people is that Microsoft HR is going to come in and clean things up. It's definitely interesting that this was the solution that Activision Blizzard found to their problems instead of going
Yeah.
the honest way. Really
I was
sad.
I did a quick little search and I didn't find a satisfying answer, but that question is like, is Microsoft friendly towards unions? Um, I don't,
Uh,
I don't, I don't have an answer to it.
I can
I
really
mean,
only think about their reputation for near monopolizing industries.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know that that as a whole they're not unionized, but then I think of something like the New York Times, right, that has all of these like subsidiaries. I'm wondering if there are some subsidiaries of Microsoft that are unionized.
Well, we'll see, for example, how the Raven software vote by the National Labor Relations Board goes.
Mhm.
Because if that works out, then that'll be first. And yeah, it could spread from there. I mean, I'm sure, considering Raven software literally works on the Call of Duty games, which has like 3 different studios rotating between that franchise like every year. It could easily just be 2 more unions right out. Or
Mhm.
just
And
make growing that specific union.
so I think that in a large corporation like that, there is room for unionized subsidiaries and non-unionized subsidiaries, right? I think that they can exist in the same place.
And what would that kind of relationship work? Like, how would the corporation managing all the subsidiaries view each of them, and how would the interrelationships work between
Well,
between unionized and non-unionized subsidiaries?
each subsidiary would have its own method for promotion and retention. And when it comes to the union, then there would be collective bargaining. But in the non-unionized subsidiaries, they would be able to do it however the administration chose. Like I think that the New York Times is actually in that boat. I think that some of their subsidiaries, and perhaps even the New York Times itself, is not union. I don't know that for sure. I'm just kind of speaking like like just off the cuff here. But like for example, I know like the Wirecutter, which is a subsidiary of the New York Times, is unionized. So and the unions for the different subsidiaries are different. So it's not one big union for all of the New York Times, but each of the little groups then has their own union. And so when it comes to negotiating contracts, it's the union negotiates it for the or for its membership. Does that make sense?
Okay, so they basically the employees they don't want to speak for themselves. They think they don't have power. Um, so they go to the union instead, who has more power than them. And feel they will give a fair voice and opportunity, and say maybe a I guess a non-unionized subsidiary where the relationship between management and employees is more amicable. So there is it's better chance of negotiating fairness.
And consider this: if you're not part of a union, then you negotiate your contract with your boss individually, right? And they can offer you whatever they want. And they'll tell you not to talk about your pay to other people because they don't want you to know who's making the most, right? But on the other hand, the union's going to be like, look, we know what everybody's being paid, and we want to negotiate an increase of, say, inflation plus 3% this year. And we want the contract to be for 2 years or whatnot, that sort of thing. If you're negotiating on your own, I mean, yes, you can quit, but that's pretty heavy-handed, right? That's a pretty extreme sort of choice that you have to make. Some people will do it.
Yeah, and they can go to competitor, and
Hmm.
supposedly, according to the competitive market, that's how businesses win and lose by which employees go where. But and trying to retain like the most skilled employees under your company. I guess there's just too many people now these days in the labor market. It's like we can just replace people coming out of college or something like that.
And
uh,
and the games industry is very much like that. There are people lined up to get into it. So very often they're not treated very well. They're not paid very well. Certainly not very evenly. Um,
yeah, these are like the passion-based industries, right? Like
mhm.
the ones that I guess popular culture hypes up and says, "Oh yes, you want to work for them because you be creating like wonderful works of art." Or,
You've always
eh,
dreamed about being in this job. How, how about
yeah.
$15,000 a year? I can't even live on that. I can't even get an apartment for that. Oh,
This is very similar to like situation in the anime industry in Japan. It's also
yeah.
very passion based. And there's been so many articles, so many blog posts in recent years of burnouts, anime productions being barely completed on time, or even just delayed, keep being delayed. Worst case scenario, like the last episodes of the anime just end up looking like crap.
Hmm.
And then there's also just cases of actually people going to the hospital or even like dying. It's really sad.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Well, so
So yeah,
imagine this.
union is one thing.
You spent your whole life like working to this, right? You've got your college degree. It's like in this field, and the only people who are willing to give you a job are going to give you poverty wages. So it's like this is your into the industry, right? The games industry, typically people only work 5 years in the game industry before they're burned out. 5 years. Can you imagine going to
Mm,
school for 4 years to get a degree in game programming or game design or something like that, and then being burned out after 5 years?
it's probably not enough time to pay off loans, huh?
No, not on poverty wages.
Yeah.
So it's like on one hand, I don't think it's a smart business practice to burn people out like that. I don't I don't think I don't think it's necessary.
Mm,
But that's a different conversation. Um, I think it's ethically very questionable to know that you're hiring people and that you're going to push them, and most of them are going to burn out.
yeah, I just like it's kind of weird. These passion-based industries versus like
Hmm.
other established industries. I don't. Is it really gonna have to be unions that offset it? Was it like history where even like the more trendy industries back in the day for or whatever the trends were, I guess, would they be based on passion, and were they those kind of workers like exploited and
Mhm.
thus paid like the poverty wages until the unions came along?
Mhm.
That how is there's a cycle, I guess, going on.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you can't break out of it, but like when when you're up against like the AAAs, like which are billion-dollar companies, right? And it's just sort of the way that they do it. How do you break out of that cycle? How do you get away from it? One way is collective bargaining. If you're in a passion industry and you know it and you've seen your colleagues work until they go to the hospital or until they, just rage quit, right? You realize there's something up. There's something wrong. There may be a better way. As an individual, you don't have that kind of voice, but as a group, you do, because you're the ones that are making the billions of dollars for the company.
Hmm. Well, I just looked up that, by the way, on, like the in Google. New York Times does have its own union. It's called like the Times Guild. So yeah,
Okay.
they are unionized. And going
So
back
the
to
wire
it,
cutter is a separate union, but and so I'm wondering if there are any like subsidiaries that are not union then, and I don't know. But
so going back to that topic, just I had a question of, how is the management of like this top at the top level, a corporation that owns all these subsidiaries, how they're gonna treat non-unionized versus unionized subsidiaries like differently, since there are like such stark differences on how management of those subsidiaries operate. One having to deal with unions, the others having like free reign, thus probably being able to like adjust their profit margins freely.
I don't know if it's legitimately free reign because if you are in an industry like this, you do want to retain talent, and so your highly productive workers, you do want to make sure that you're taking care of them. You do want to make sure that they actually look forward to coming to work. You don't want to burn them out.
It is more extreme in the fashion industry compared to other industries.
For sure.
Mm, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see then. It's like how the results come out for like
I'm excited for it,
studio.
honestly.
Yeah. We just have to wait and see
hmm
just
I think
what
I
games.
think it's a positive thing. And you're right. We will see, and I hope that it has some impact on like limiting crunch. Because
Mm,
I think about the poor Cyberpunk 2077 people who crunched to get a PS4 release that was just wretched out. So crush those poor people to get something out that was terrible,
yeah,
and delayed the release on the PC, which is what I wanted. But
yeah. I think I read in the news. There's a new studio formed by CD Projekt Red employees. I don't know details on that. Like,
hmm
it's mostly the management's fault, right? That CD Projekt Red that everyone crunched. It's not so much the development heads.
well,
That
I would say, yeah, I would agree with you. It has to do with like sort of like the executive producers and the producers, and if people can't manage this, if they keep changing things and moving it around, yeah, you're going to have to do a lot more work over again. And sometimes, I guess the thought is that in the industry, when that happens, things get better, but they don't always.
yeah.
And so,
So
go ahead.
I was just gonna talk about their new studio because I'm looking at news about it. Do you have anything to like finish up on your point? I guess.
Oh no, I'm fine.
Okay, so the new studio is Rebel Wolves. It's just say they're veterans of it. They just I think so far they're just marketing like an upcoming game. Um.
Well, it takes a good 3 years to release like a big
Oh,
title.
wait a second. Okay, so co-founder of this new studio of CD Projekt Red veterans. Uh,
Oh,
one
is
of
that the one that's not
them.
hiring any women?
Wait, is it really? Is
I don't
Rebel?
know. But there is a company that's trying to do that, and oh my god. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. You were on a tangent. I'll Google it. So
Long CDPR, but it doesn't seem to be. No, it doesn't seem to mention anything about that. So one of the co-founders left CD Projekt Red because he was accused of bullying colleagues.
oh
Yeah. So unfortunately, it seems while they may be leaving the management behind of CD Projekt Red behind, the employees
they're
of
gonna
this
take
new
all of their
studio may
problems with them.
still may take some of those problems, yes, with them. So, okay.
Well, no, I read about a company that said that they weren't going to hire any women so that they wouldn't have any problems with sexual harassment.
Interesting solution.
I think that they've forgotten a couple of things. And number one is that like gay people exist. Just saying. And another thing is, I don't know. It's like that seems like that would be a problem in terms of hiring. I don't think you're allowed to hire based on gender, but they may not be in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
So
Please, do you have anything to ask?
I think he's
I
just
guess.
chilling on the stream. So
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know how it works. Is the streaming set up? Oh, okay. Oh, are you still working? Okay, are you so any questions do you want to ask? Okay. Cool. Uh yeah, we just have to wait and see. Um I wonder when the effects of it will first be felt. Because like Rodeo Workers United, it's nice they were the first union to get that label, but their studios, they're gonna stay at that scale of indie level. Can't imagine, for example, that a company that unionizes very early on is gonna be able to grow very fast, unless I guess word of mouth if they get lucky. But I guess so we have to see the effects of unionized companies making games and say the next few Call of Duty games come out that get made by Raven Software. If as long as they go back to work, I suppose. I guess that's like the first benchmark of how games are going to affect like just the quality of games and the sales.
I think
See if
that
the industry will follow
I think
along.
one of the challenges with that is that you can't really judge something based off of the performance of one company, right?
Hmm.
Successful or unsuccessful.
So preferably, we need see more unions. I think there's still of hesitancy around forming unions. Like the union busting firm that
Hmm.
Activision Blizzard hired, they literally, I think, go into a company and they have all these presentations and seminars on why you shouldn't form a union. That's why they're called union busting.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're just gonna maintain this rhetoric, I guess, for a long time. It's gonna be a slow adoption. So, fortunately, since the well, it was this campaign by I guess the biggest labor unions in North America is going on, the Communication Workers of America. As long as they maintain the pace they're going at, I think we'll eventually get enough unions around the industry, so we get like a decent sample size of performance in the end. Then from
So check
that,
out the link that I dropped into the thread.
okay. Oh, World of
It's
Warcraft.
ex Blizzard.
Of course, it's dumb.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, right? Of course.
Only female staffers of the dog. Well, I guess that checks their diversity box.
Yeah. Yeah, but they're not paying the dog as much.
Hmm. Kind of lame that I ditched their coworkers though. To where it could
Yeah,
still, why still like
Well,
just advocating for change.
and over something that's not their coworkers' fault, right? So if you're harassed, it's not your fault.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I mean, it's a typical, like, it sounds like and I don't want to be reading into like who these people are. I don't know who formed this, but it sounds like it's a bunch of harassers that are just worried about like their behavior.
Again, an interesting idea to self-police themselves, I guess, in their own
Right?
safe space, quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting way of putting it, actually.
Hmm.
But like I said, I don't see it. I don't see it creating a safe space, and the type of behavior that they would see against their female employees, they're going to see anyhow, um, regardless. And then what's the excuse going to be? Get rid of the dog.
I guess you just find the frat culture more acceptable between themselves.
Hmm.
Just having to introduce it to someone they perceive too different to that kind of culture.
Right.
They just like their frat culture. They just want to preserve that.
Coincidentally, they haven't hired any minorities either, but that's just a coincidence.
Sure, yeah.
And I just totally made that up. So no, it's a total.
Okay, never mind. Okay.
But it sounds
Just joking.
plausible, though, doesn't it? Yeah, it's like that's the thing. Is like when I said that, it just sounds like it. Oh yeah, that like sounds like the same type of decision, right? Well, we decided we don't want to have racism, so we're not hiring any minorities. How
Yeah,
does
just
that work?
joking. Just joking. Whoever's watching on Twitch, we're just joking.
Yeah.
Uh,
Did you have more
oh,
questions, Carter? And do you have more slides?
no, no. It's literally only 5 slides. I decided this time I was gonna see what happened if I cut down the number of slides. Usually I have like 8 slides in the presentation, and it
Hmm.
takes a while for me to get through them. I just decided to cut them down. Also, because I wanted to get back into the flow of things, because it's the beginning of the semester, and I have like a bunch of other stuff to do, as I told you before.
Hmm.
So, and even after this discussion, I may keep the slides down a bit, because I have other stuff to do as a student. So, yeah, well, I'm still looking forward to hosting more of these discussions. Uh, I guess a hint as to an idea for what I want in the next discussion. Thinking of those, what was it, NFT games, actually.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that there's actually something that's some interesting stuff to be said in there. Um, I would say the challenge is going to be finding a way to represent the spectrum in here. And I don't want to say both sides just because I don't feel like it's one of those things. It's a
Mm.
complicated issue, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's just I just want to explore as a genre mainly. I don't want to get too much into detail of like the financial implications of investing in NFTs, how that's gonna play out in the
Hmm.
future. I just want to explore this new genre that's emerging in the video game industry. So that'll be for next discussion maybe, or I'll change my mind. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Uh,
like I think I missed one of your conversations.
yeah,
You
you
missed.
missed the JRPG one, which was the
Yeah.
other game genre one discussion. Uh,
Well, have you considered like talking about like hard games or like because I
oh,
mean I'm just thinking like Elden Ring is out now, right?
wait, board games, as in you mean like Dark Souls, Souls likes?
Yeah, like the whole like as a genre as well, right?
I find the interesting tie-in to a topic, uh, to a personal idea I have. Like,
Mhm.
okay, admittedly, I I knew you'd be personally interested in the video game unions. That's why did this discussion, and I didn't have a personal idea to tie into it. I just did it as this. But my other discussions, I tied them um, into personal connection I have. For example, I'm Chinese, so I wanted to do a discussion on the Chinese government gaming limits.
Mhm.
Um, and the JRPG discussion that I recently had, because I guess I'm kind of a Japanophile, I guess a little
Mhm.
bit. So I looked up this term Galapagos syndrome before, and I thought, oh, this feels like something I can tie into Tales of Rise, because I think like Tales of Rise, that's like the first Tales game that kind of went worldwide. Like before that, it's not such a known JRPG franchise compared to Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy or Pokemon. Or I just wanted to there's something personal I could tie into that, and thus
Mhm.
it'll make it more interesting for me to talk about it.
Have you thought about like putting together like a small panel, like bringing in people to talk about a particular topic with you at the event,
Uh,
so that you can moderate then, right? And
what kind of
and
connections are you thinking of? Like
well,
just
no, I
in
mean
my
it would
club?
depend. It would depend on the topic, obviously, right? But bring in people with a little bit of relative expertise or experience to be able to talk about it, and then just make sure that one person just doesn't completely dominate in the conversation, that both or that all of the people end up being heard, and that the audience gets a chance to communicate as well.
I wish I had those kind of connections. If we're talking about like literal like experts within the industry, I think it'd be interesting though if I could collaborate with members of this club.
Hmm.
Maybe we could find something jointly discuss. And I guess I would moderate. So are you saying like I still want an audience? I still want like audience collaboration in general.
Hmm.
These future discussions to have people come in. Would your idea of an expert panel would still be able to open up the floor to everyone else and go
Oh,
around
absolutely.
table?
You control the
Okay.
format, right? And that's the
Oh,
thing,
so it
because
depends on me as the moderator. Okay.
well, yeah, no. So you are the moderator, and it is your choice. And the big thing that you want to make sure is like that one person isn't just like kind of like rolling over the whole conversation and dominating it. Um, and if part of that is that you want to hear from both people, and then you also want to hear, or like I keep saying both, but it could be like it could even be three or four. It doesn't matter. But you want to hear from all of your panelists, but then you also want to hear from the audience, then just architect it that way. Just set it up and say like the panelists are going to make it like just have a very brief introduction to their expertise and what it is they want to talk about. When I organize these things, and I really like to organize panels, to be honest with you, because I love to be the fly on the wall and hear experts talk amongst themselves. Um, but what I usually try to do is get the panelists to start the conversation, and then try to bring in something from the audience. And with something like Discord, it would be even easier to actually bring them in as like people who are conversants as well, right? People who are talking and participating.
Okay. Okay. It might. Maybe I shouldn't go to talk to outside people if we're gonna have another sort of disappointing like turnout. It'll be a little awkward for them to talk to empty air or just between ourselves again.
Yeah, so
I'll
I
talk
think it.
to people in our club then, and that would
Yeah,
help his turnout because I would be able to talk with people who want to all decide on a single date between us to hold a discussion, and that maybe more intra club interesters in
I
these
think it.
discussions.
I think it
Uh,
also helps to to be interested enough in the conversation yourself that just being part of the conversation is good enough, um, and letting people know your expectations, Say like, we're trying to build an audience for this, that sort of thing.
Mm.
I mean, it's all fair. I really believe in a certain amount of like radical transparency. Like telling people what is, why I'm doing something, or why I think it's interesting, what I hope to get out of it. Um, I think that lets people like sort of tag along and be part of it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll think about it. But I
But
will probably, unless I can juggle some ideas in my head.
yes,
So
this
the
is
next
your
discussion,
thing.
it may come sooner. Next discussion may come sooner. It may come later, depending on what I
Okay.
settle on.
So it is your discussion. It's your baby. Set it up however you want.
I would love
Uh,
for someone to succeed me.
I will
I think.
completely support you. I like the idea of it, and I'm willing to help too. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, I
I just got
appreciate
to be
it.
careful about my work schedule because sometimes it just gets out of hand. Like
Yeah.
this last week.
I see. All right. Guess we're wrapping up then.
Okay.
It's about an hour. Yeah. All right. Well, so everyone, uh, all three of us, thanks for coming to this discussion. Yeah.
Thanks for hosting it.
I hope it was interesting to listen into, Julius. Yeah. Yeah. It's emerging trend. So, mm. All right. Yeah. I guess you can just end this recording.